Functions are the most basic building block of PHP, but I do think they deserve a little bit of a revisit for us to talk about them, because then I want to talk about some more interesting function related stuff. You know this. We declare a function with the function keywords and we give it a name and we pass some parameters. Here I'm returning a string from my add stars function. It's quite important that you remember to return values from functions. By default, PHP will return null from a function, so it can be tricky then to check whether you got what you expected from it. For functions which are in the global namespace, we can literally just use them by saying their name. It's a feature which has been around for a really long time, but in the new versions of PHP, we are starting to add new features that relate to functions. A particularly big milestone for me, I think, was PHP 5.3, which introduced the anonymous functions. If you're using JavaScript, you're familiar with this. It uses a lot of anonymous functions, but in PHP, they were pretty new. The 5.3 anonymous functions feature is one of the reasons that you see the frameworks increasing their base requirements, and it's for features like this which makes such a big difference to the way that we can build our applications. We sort of had this functionality previously with create function, but it was nothing like as convenient. The anonymous functions literally are a function with no name. It's an internal representation of a closure object, and you can then pass that around, declare it just in the place that you use it, but crucially, the anonymous functions mean that you don't have a global function name available in your root namespace. Because if you declare a function that you're only going to use once, perhaps you're passing it to array walk or something like that, I use them a lot with the autoloaders as well, then it's very easy for somebody else to accidentally reuse your function because it currently meets their needs. For a use once function, the anonymous functions are really elegant. They're also a nice way of injecting functionality, so doing some really nice sort of loose coupling for the kinds of work that we would do with a more object-oriented application. You'll sometimes hear the anonymous functions called lambda functions, and you'll also hear them called closures if they enclose variables from an outside scope. I'll just show you some examples. I think it's the easiest way to do it. The anonymous function is literally a function with no name. You can declare it in the place where a callback would go when you're using a function which would have callback. So where you might pass the name of a function, you can pass a variable that holds the function name. You can pass a variable that contains the anonymous function itself, as I've assigned it to $ping in the example here. But you can also pass any other valid form of callback, including declaring the function in place where it's going to be used. Have a look at this function declaration. So we're assigning the result of this anonymous function. We're assigning the anonymous function to $ping. So I have the function has no name. That's why it's anonymous. That's how I remember this. The function has no name. It's an anonymous function. I have empty brackets here in my declaration, but if your function takes parameters, you would declare them absolutely in the normal way. You can have optional parameters, exactly as you would with the PHP functions. They are a basic building block, and the knowledge that you already have transfers really nicely. All my function does is echo something. It's a very trivial example. Once I've assigned my anonymous function to $ping, I can then call it with $ping bracket bracket. PHP will resolve that this is an anonymous function, and it will then just know that it can execute it. I mentioned the closures earlier, so let me show you an example of that as well. It's a similar sort of format where I'm creating an anonymous function, storing it in a variable, and then calling it by referring to that variable. So we start off by setting $message to hello, and then we declare our anonymous function and assign it to $greet. Have a look at that anonymous function, right? Function keyword, no name, we're anonymous. It takes a name variable, so my function accepts a name variable. Then we have the use keyword. You see use in a bunch of different contexts in modern PHP. It's a very overused, reserved word. But in this case, it's saying you should use $message. And the value of $message becomes part of the function declaration. So the value of message is baked in at the time that this function is declared. I run the function with $greet and I pass in Daisy. I get hello Daisy. So we stored the message at the time that we declared the function. What's interesting about this is if I redefine $message after I have created the anonymous function and before I run it, it's irrelevant. So if I change $message here to be hey instead of hello, $message at the value that it was when we declared our anonymous function is the value that gets used. So the variables get passed in at call time, but the enclosed variables, the stuff after the use keyword, gets put in at declare time, and that's quite an important distinction. In PHP, we can use anonymous functions all over the place. If you look behind the scenes in your favorite framework, you're very likely to see them. A really, really powerful feature, and one that I hope you can now make use of yourself.